Oh, good heavens, lads, the clouds have parted, and light shines down upon the huddled masses as Degreelessness returns to once again impart the gift of knowledge, sarcasm, and cynicism to those enlightened few who would choose to hear it. So, turn not your eyes and ears away, as I, Shanghai Pete, the people's champion, high-tech, low-life, trusted member of the media, your humble host and good buddy in the mix, prepare to rant, rave, and hurl curses at the detestable dredges of the industry we all love to hate and hate to love. And oh boy, have they been earning that reputation so far this month. Good fucking God. You know what comes next, guys? So obtain the frosty beverage, grab the backwood, and brace for impact as we get deep inside. Now, someone once said, or at least named an Aphex Twin song, start as you mean to go on. So let us begin with a quick recap of the past few weeks. I've had to actually be in the office for most of the month working on net admin shit. Total bummer. So we've missed a few things. We've got Blizzard CEO unbelievably attempting to defend the indefensible, so business as usual over there. We've also got the gaming industry's version of that weird kid in your high school that didn't understand the difference between good attention and bad attention, Hideo Kojima, being blamed for a real-world assassination plot? Fucking what? This is yet another in a series of increasingly insane events that have forced me to conclude that this cannot possibly be the correct timeline. Somehow, somewhere, something went terribly wrong and Back to the Future 2'd us into some horrible alternate nightmare universe.
We have to go back!
We've also got Ubisoft using their absurd corporate fortune and influence to continue doing what they do best, blindly trailblazing a path of ignorance and greed for the industry that leads only to more exploitation, depravity, and predatory innovation. Which to myself and viewers of this channel sounds like just another day at the office, but somehow it has once again managed to shock all the journalists whose job it is to cover this stuff every single day. I wonder what the difference is. Oh right, those people get fucking paid. I wonder if that has anything to do with the howling Stygian void they have in place of where you'd find ethics in normal people. Someone should look into that. And not one to be left out of a particularly hellish news cycle, we've also got Rockstar once again running afoul of their abused and demoralized customers. Now, I like to call them the Apple of the video game industry because despite people knowing full well that they're ultimately a force for evil, that doesn't stop everyone from lining up with their wallets out whenever the results of millions of dollars worth of forced labor are tangled in front of them, even if it looks indistinguishable from the last thing you gave them money for. Determined to stay in the news cycle though, they've also been talking about the next GTA game, and it turns out, oh god, shock and horror, the protagonist is a woman. You already know what it is. You're gonna have people on one side being like, oh, this is representation and it's woke and this is great. And then on the other side, you're gonna have people being like, this is woke nonsense. Rockstar went woke and they're gonna go broke, blah, 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 blah. Y'all are so fucking boring. Like, who gives a shit? At worst, it's a cynical attempt to sell a few more copies and stay in the news cycle a little longer. Again, who fucking cares? And at best, it'll be just another Grand Theft Auto game that everyone's gonna buy anyway, no matter who the fucking protagonist is. So, I don't know, maybe shut the fuck up. There's also the totally shocking story of a CEO doing more horrible shit, like buying a malware company in the case of Unity. GameStop is apparently more committed to tanking my meme stock portfolio than anyone could have guessed, as they insisted on launching NFTs even after the market cratered and everyone hated them. Thanks guys, I haven't worked for you in over 10 years, but you're still finding ways to fuck me. That's great. And lastly, let's close with a bit of good news, as it looks like the KOTOR remake everyone knew would be awful but was somehow pretending it wouldn't be, has been delayed indefinitely due to staff layoffs, including art and design directors. What the real reason for this is, we'll likely never know, but I also don't care. I'm not one to question providence, and this is just one game less that we'll all have to suffer through watching be ruined. So, hooray! Moving on, our main story tonight concerns the overall state of the industry, and specifically Activision Blizzard. The answer to the question, what if sex crimes were shitty video games that also robbed you? Yep, we didn't want it, no one asked for it, and some people even explicitly asked not to have it.
Hey, just was wondering, is this an out-of-season April Fool's joke?
But much like a lecherous member of Blizzard management alone with a female subordinate, it forced itself on us. That's right, I'm talking about Diablo Immortal, the product of decades worth of money and R&D to determine exactly how much blatant and overt exploitation and abuse people will tolerate. Turns out the answer is quite a fucking bit. In fact, this entire escapade thus far has been one of the least shocking and predictable in recent memory. Of course, it absolutely obliterated all previous established norms of what was regarded as acceptable monetization. Of course, it was universally reviled by any normal person with a functioning brain and measurable levels of self-respect. Of course, its Metacritic user score was so low it practically broke the laws of mathematics, and of course, none of that even mattered in the slightest, and instead, Blizzard was rewarded for inflicting this obscene monument to unmitigated greed upon loyal customers with hundreds of millions of dollars in profit. That's because we live in a world where the very concept of justice was savagely bludgeoned to death years ago by the corporate establishment, and thus things like consequences and repercussions for displays of reckless exploitation and abuse are no longer things that exist. Instead, we reward companies that take advantage of us. So fucking cool, right? Now, largely as a result of all that, the question that's been on my mind a lot recently is, how in the fuck do these companies continue to get away with shit like this? And I don't mean the normal criminal capers that corpos typically get up to in our wretched modern era, being generally indifferent to customers, offering shit products at shit prices, y'all know the list. No, sadly, we all know that's just how things are these days. What I'm talking about is the shit that's truly egregious, the stuff that still manages to leave the majority of the industry in disbelief and shock. And yet, despite it all, never seem to cause publishers to lose any money, and actually ends up making them even more money in most cases, stuff like Diablo Immortal. How in the good fuck do companies like Blizzard continue to fail upwards while pulling garbage like this? Let's see if we can figure it out. To begin, let's take a closer look at the Diablo Immortal fiasco. Now, if Blizzard had just collected their money and shut the fuck up, that would be one thing. Maybe we wouldn't be here having this conversation right now. If you're going to be a festering hive of vile human excess that relies on deception and exploiting psychological weaknesses in your customers, at least have the fucking balls to not lie about it. Don't also ask customers to believe that the betrayal and violation your game inflicted upon them were somehow not your intention. But corpos just got a corpo, they can't help themselves. I mean, you gotta understand, robbing people and preying on vulnerable customers, it just doesn't get them off anymore. So now they've also got to pile on stuff like humiliation as well. So when Blizzard CEO Mike Ybarra was questioned about the criticism leveled at Diablo Immortal, he could have said something like, "Revenue is exceeding targets and feedback metrics remain within acceptable and predicted tolerances, so Diablo Immortal is viewed as a success." But he didn't. Instead, he said, "When we think about monetization, at the very highest level it was, how do we give a free Diablo experience to hundreds of millions of people, where they can literally do 99.5% of everything in the game?" Which is corpo speak for, if you feel disappointed, deceived, or taken advantage of by our product, that's your fault. We were trying to do you a favor. All we wanted was to just give you a fun Diablo experience for free. You see, for all Ybarra tries to cosplay as an actual person with human feelings and relatable qualities, there's just no reality where any of this is even remotely believable. He knows that, but he also knows it doesn't fucking matter, which is why he's not even trying very hard. Goes on to say, "The monetization comes in only at the end game. The philosophy was always to lead with great gameplay and make sure that hundreds of millions of people can go through the whole campaign without any costs. From that standpoint, I feel really good about it as an introduction to Diablo." Oh. Okay, so if the philosophy was to lead with great gameplay, is it just earning millions of dollars accidentally? Of course not. The simple, obvious truth is that this was always the plan from the beginning. Now, generally, a company would first need to give a fuck about customers' opinion of their conduct and performance in order to feel compelled to offer a defense for something they've done, however half-hearted and pathetic. And as we are all well aware, giving a fuck about their customers is something modern Blizzard is just not capable of, even if there was anyone left there with a desire to do so. No, anyone like that was either fired, demoted 27 floors into the basement, or molested away quite some time ago, sadly. Nowadays, if you can't fit it in a spreadsheet or control it with an algorithm, it doesn't exist as far as Blizzard management is concerned. And the worst part is, as we've mentioned many times over for years, I can't even blame them. I mean, still hate them, of course, but I get it. And that's also why this is so fascinating, though. They continue to push and get away with more and more, until we're now at the point where the very idea that upper management at a company like Blizzard would ever care about something as pedestrian and old-fashioned as maintaining a positive public image sounds like a fucking deranged fantasy. Which is why that recent Mike Ybarra interview caused me to start thinking about all this shit in the first place. And before we go any further, I always feel it prudent to remind everybody that Activision Blizzard is not your buddy, guy. It is a corporation, and as a corporation, it has only a single goal. As we all know, make money. It's not to make fun games for you, it's to make money. Selling you games just happens to be the way that this particular company makes that money. Remember, from the perspective of management, they couldn't give a fuck less what they're selling you. It could be fucking rivets or 2x4s or hammers. It doesn't have to be games. They're barely even aware that it's games that they're selling. They don't give a shit. Thus, we can conclude that any action or lack of action on their part has been calculated to either increase corporate profits or at the very least not negatively impact them. So, that then begs the question, why do they feel that in addition to releasing predatory non-games like Diablo Immortal, they can now even abandon any attempt at bare minimum stuff like maintaining a positive public image? I mean, I get companies like Ubisoft or Rockstar releasing garbage, but then at least having the decency to pretend to customers like they didn't, or that all those game-ruining microtransactions were somehow a mistake or something. But how are we at a point where you can release a game like Diablo Immortal, but then also tell customers directly to their face, fuck you? How is that much rampant, unabashed anti-consumer behavior no longer a concern for the bottom line? I mean, it never was a huge concern, but it was at least there. It was at least part of the calculus. But now it's not at all. So the big question is, why is that? How have things fallen so far so quickly? We were in decline, but it was more of a managed decline, and this just seems a little out of control to me. So what the fuck? Well, it may not surprise you to learn that, like many things both fantastic and horrifying in this world, I feel the blame can likely be laid at the feet of the internet and social media at large. Yep, unfortunately, as fun as all the memes are, the extreme cartoonish nature of the dystopian clown world that the internet and social media has created for us all had the somewhat minor side effect of allowing any sufficiently large company with enough capital to completely brainwash, manipulate, and influence an enormous percentage of their entire customer base. So basically like everybody. And it's so ridiculously effective. For many companies, it completely did away with any need to actively manage or maintain things like public perception or brand awareness, to say nothing of laughable archaic concepts like customer satisfaction and goodwill. Think that sounds extreme? Just look around, dummy. It no longer matters at all how much people may dislike or even hate a company or product. Only one thing does matter. What's on the timeline? What's in your fucking feed? There's no amount of outrage, backlash, negative press, predatory business practices, blatant consumer abuse, and exploitation that can keep a sufficiently large company or corporation out of the timeline. And would you look at that? It also just so happens that literally every single person at all times voluntarily carries around with them a nightmare rectangle that injects the timeline and whatever is on it directly into their fucking brains 24/7. And to make it even worse, the terrifying and sickening reality is that not only is there no escape from what the nightmare rectangle shows us, but even if there was, people wouldn't want it. They like it. Almost no one actually needs their phone with them at all times, but we all voluntarily participate in the mass cultural delusion that we do, even though we all know it's a lie. Battery dies, screen gets smashed, no service, people panic and act like their very survival is threatened. A few hours without the nightmare rectangle boring holes through their brains is panic-inducing. A full day, God forbid, more, it's practically inconceivable. Now imagine you were the CEO of a huge corporation. Could you even conceive of or ask for a device more suited for exploitative advertising? It's insane. That's how thoroughly we've allowed ourselves to be trained, and while sure, technically the nightmare rectangle can do other stuff, it can make phone calls, send messages, and take a picture of your dick, and that's how it's marketed, of course, but it's clear that its primary function now is essentially just a glorified advertisement delivery vector. It might not have started out that way or even been designed with that in mind, but at this point, I don't think it can be argued that that's how everyone is using them. It's not texting, phone calls, or the camera that's draining your battery, it's the fucking timeline, it's all that swiping. And the timeline, or your feed, has been expertly tuned by the world's leading data scientists and psychologists over years and years to ensure we all spend as much time as possible scrolling, refreshing, and swiping. Why is that? Well, it's because they know that the longer you stare into the glowing misery portal, the more ads they can sell. You know the phrase, if something's free, you're the product? Yeah, well, there's a good fucking reason for that. Because even when it's not showing you an ad, it's figuring out how to get better at showing you ads. Now at this point, almost everything in your life, including and especially your precious fucking phone, is designed to do one thing above all else: make you a better consumer. It's all society wants, that's all corpos want, and ultimately, it's all the fucking economy wants. Or dead-eyed, empty-headed, complacent consumer automatons staring vacantly at the glowing dopamine machine waiting for it to tell them what to buy next. And that's exactly what they want. And in this particular case, what they want specifically is for you to buy shiny digital nothings in Diablo Immortal. And if you doubt my conclusion there for even a second, just take a look at how well that's been working out. Because last I checked, Blizzard was making record profits. Now, the alternative to that, of course, is their worst nightmare, probably the only thing they hate more than the expenditure of actual effort. The opposite of a well-trained and docile customer is an educated, skeptical consumer. Consumers that are informed, angry perhaps, oh god, demanding, and suspicious are hard to please, and even worse, they're disruptive. They cost money, time, resources, personnel, and effort to appease and satisfy. Informed consumers force companies to earn their support through consistent quality, behavior, and products that are respectful of time and money. And as I'm sure you can tell, as is pretty obvious, that's the last thing that they want. All corpo institutions harbor an instinctive burning resentment for anyone or anything that eats into their bottom line. How often have you seen the term entitled thrown around derisively by access media outlets? They literally write entire articles for the sole purpose of running defense for these huge publishers and companies. Just like their counterparts in the mainstream news media, whose primary function is manufacturing the consent of the governed, access gaming journalism is often used as a cudgel intended to enforce and promote the preferred narrative that we should all just be grateful and eager, unquestioning revenue faucets for our corporate betters, content to be permitted the privilege of playing the latest AAA $70 fuckfest made in a factory with slave labor. It's not a coincidence that decorum, civility, and politeness have a tendency to conveniently manifest out of thin air as a top priority whenever people have a need to voice grievances with a company or product, and then helpfully vanish just as quickly the moment there's no longer a need to stamp out an unpopular opinion. As we've all seen, most journalists are notoriously eager to wield their big blue check marks like a weaponized phallus against anyone who fails to venerate them sufficiently, but oh heavens, the moment their beloved corpo ruling class may face pressure or criticisms from the common folk, all of a sudden politeness and civility are the primary concern. How dare you sully the sanctity of your betters with the small-minded and vulgar concerns of mere peasants? Maybe instead you should all shut the fuck up about the price of gems in Diablo Immortal. Why can't you just do what you're told and be more compliant, docile consumers? Why can't you just fall in line and behave? We're trying to make some fucking money here, and you and all your silly ideas of getting a good game are ruining it. Never forget that that is the perspective of the gaming industry establishment, and they'll stop at nothing to ensure that it's enforced because that's what any company does. They protect their profits. Encouraging the gaming press to publicly shame and gaslight people just happens to be one of the more visible ways that they do it, but trust, that shit's light work to them. Fuck those norm-humping crybabies anyway. The money I spend on companies' products that keeps their business alive absolutely fucking does entitle me to a product that I'm satisfied with. Suck a dick. Anyone who tries to convince you to settle for less in pretty much any situation or circumstance is your enemy. But I digress, that's just how fucking good the Nightmare Rectangle is at what it does. It's so good that we're actively surprised when a company like Blizzard even does the bare minimum to maintain a positive public image. After all, as far as we can tell, why should they bother? They've already got your personal data, your gaming habits, your spending habits, and your online activity in their database. The algorithm that ensures their ads, targeted specifically to you, remain unavoidable and in your face, it's already running. Nothing you can do or say will stop that, and there is no escape.
Sick Sad World.
Nowhere is safe from the Nightmare Rectangle and the brainwashing timeline that it broadcasts every hour of every day. Remember, anyone with enough money can have it show anything they want to anyone at any time. And people wonder why the world's so fucked up and everybody acts like they're in a high school cafeteria. It's fucking insane. It's out of hand. No company, business, or even politician needs to be held accountable for anything anymore. Timeline self-selects and enforces everyone's confirmation bias. By design, it will never show you anything from outside your chosen echo chamber. Why is that? Well, because promoting content that challenges a person's beliefs is not very profitable. Pissing you off is profitable, but challenging your beliefs, not so much. Confrontation makes most people uncomfortable and defensive, which tends to suppress casual consumer spending, whereas agreeable people are easier to control and influence. So the algorithm is highly motivated to not just maintain the mini echo chamber and safe space we've all created for ourselves, but also to help you enforce it as well. Now, if you, like me, view Blizzard as an enemy and fucking hate them, well, then the people you follow on social media or the subreddits you subscribe to all reflect that. And unless I go out of my way and intentionally seek out content that presents a view contrary to that, I simply won't ever see it. And the corpos? Guess what, guys? They're just fucking fine with that, because they know that their advertising is gonna find you no matter what kind of content you consume. Research even shows that the effectiveness of advertising and paid promotions remains relatively consistent regardless of how it's presented or displayed. And in a world like that, shit, can you even fault companies like Blizzard if they no longer feel the need to even bother to defend themselves? They don't need to. Why would they? Who's even listening? Go ahead, watch those Down with Blizzard videos and retweet that fuck Bobby Kotick meme. As long as you continue to interact with and engage on social media, you remain an accessible target for their manipulation and advertising strategies. Doesn't matter one bit to any company why or how you remain engaged, just as long as you do. It's all that matters. Just like the up and down vote buttons on YouTube, the algorithm doesn't give a fuck which one you clicked, only that you did. Engagement is binary, it's not negative or positive, just like monthly active user numbers or daily login activity or whether or not you tap that ad by accident. You're either a yes or a no. Can we serve you ads or not? And as long as enough people are in that yes column, companies like Activision Blizzard will never again have to give a single fuck how many might utterly despise them. Metacritic user scores, Twitter tantrums, streaming numbers, even scathing and eloquent YouTube videos crafted by, a champion of the people perhaps, exposing the predatory calculus and downright manipulative schemes that are at the heart of everything a shitbag company like Blizzard does, none of that has any effect on their earnings or profits anymore. Because they know that their advertisements are still going to be in your fucking base, killing your dudes regardless. That viral tweet, post, video, whatever that you might have seen is the equivalent of a free billboard that someone placed right the fuck in front of your face. You don't even have the option of looking in a different direction, because regardless of the context, you are still seeing that shit. That brand is still getting delivered directly to your sloppy brain. How much is that even worth? Can you even calculate it? Sorry to be such a bummer, geez, but there's just no escape from the timeline. The way they see it, your money is already as good as theirs, just like everybody else's. They won't even pretend to give a shit about you anymore. The numbers are in, and they know they don't have to. They know they can get away with. They have several years of data to prove it. So, the jig is up. They know you'll buy their shit even if you hate them. That's why they're so bold now. That's the answer. So we've reached an impasse. These are the new terms of the relationship. Once Blizzard and the like figured out what it was, they stopped acting like they gave a fuck. They know that they can count on your money. And what does a company do that knows it can count on your money? Whatever the fuck they want. Just look how they behave. Think about the year that Blizzard has had. Lawsuits that exceed the bounds of the genre, international scandals, a stream of endless reports of sexual misconduct, employee abuse, and discrimination. Boycotts, protests, canceled events, management turnover, acquisitions, and delayed projects. And after all of that, you'd think that any company would be grateful to simply still be in business. But not Blizzard. They looked at all that shit and instead thought, I bet we can get away with even more. And that's when they decided to release Diablo Immortal. They dropped the most valueless, predatory, exploitative game maybe ever into that ravaged and desecrated consumer landscape without even a second's hesitation. And the worst part is they were right. Not just a little right, not kinda sorta right, not mostly right, totally, utterly, and completely right. It's making record millions. Now tell me, are those the actions of a company that's worried about what little old you might think about them? That gives a fuck about you at all? Obviously not. Corpos only do things that are strictly necessary to maintain profit margins and not a drop more. Diablo Immortal is awful, everyone said. Lowest Metacritic score ever, they said. Worst monetization in history, they said. Most transparently predatory microtransaction model the industry has ever seen, they said. Blizzard is surely doomed now. Their customers won't stand for this. They won't get away with it this time, no shot. Yeah, that's all true, but you know what else is true? They definitely fucking are. That's how good they've gotten at this scheme. Modern game developers are now officially able to be simultaneously hated and reviled while also making record profits. And while we've seen evidence of the phenomenon becoming increasingly more widespread over the years, it's now undeniable. Apparently, being an absurdly successful game developer not only does not require you to even make good games, but it also doesn't require anyone to even like you. In fact, as far as I can tell, it doesn't even matter if everyone hates you. Nothing matters. Just keep scrolling, swipe down on your feed, look at your mentions, check the DMs, refresh the timeline. The only certainty we have is that the industry will keep pushing and testing boundaries and seeing what they can get away with. Look at another recent example, the latest Last of Us remake installment and the controversy it's apparently generated. Sure, to us out here in internet land, it certainly appears as though many people are pissed off about it and that there's a big backlash, but is there really? After all, they obviously were confident enough in their sales projections to even make it in the first place. Remember, by the time we're seeing viral Reddit posts, angry tweets, and excoriating YouTube videos about a game, they've already made their fucking money. Long been had that shit. If a publisher isn't 100% sure that they're making money, that shit is scrapped long before anyone can make a YouTube video about it. Or look at Cyberpunk 2077. Biggest disappointment of the year, they said. Worst bugs ever, they said. Totally unplayable. This game is doomed. Yet it broke Steam records and sold and is still selling millions of copies. Granted, in fairness, I personally love that game, but the point is that internet scandal and outrage doesn't actually mean shit as far as profits are concerned. Not anymore. First, they got rid of physical media and trashed the concept of software ownership. Then, they stopped bothering to finish games before they sold them. Then, they stopped bothering to finish them at all. Then, they stopped asking for just an upfront purchase price. Then they sold the unfinished game back to you again, but now it's called a live service and you have to give them even more money because the game never being finished is now actually a new product. Then they stopped caring whether a game was fun because they discovered people would buy them even if they weren't. Then they began asking you to pay them again to make the game less bad. Then they asked you to pay yet again to avoid playing the even worse parts of the game. Then they started selling you digital stuff that didn't actually exist. Then they stopped providing even digital stuff and simply asked you to hand over more money for stuff that they were going to make later but wouldn't tell you when. Then they started selling games you'd already bought back to you again, only this time they're worse. Then they stopped pretending that they were even still trying to make things that people would like because they found out they could even trick you into buying stuff you didn't want. Then they stopped bothering to make games at all because they realized that if they put the word mobile in the title and only sold it for phones, no one would notice or care.
With mobile apps, we now have the ability to make games that are boring and stupid.
Then they stopped even being polite about it and instead asked if we even had phones. And now they no longer can be bothered to even pretend to care about their customers at all since they've realized it's cheaper and more profitable to just manipulate them instead. They know what they got and they know you want it. And guess what? You gon' take it however they want you to take it because they also know you have no other option. I mean, after all, what's anybody gonna do about it? Just keep scrolling. Swipe down your feed. Look at your mentions. Check the DMs. Refresh the timeline. Alright, that's our show. Thank you so much for watching and spending this little bit of your free time with us tonight. We love you today. We absolutely love you all the way. Oh boy, that was a fun episode. Don't y'all love it when I come back from a little break just to drop like a 25-minute essay on how miserable everything is? Somebody's got to do it, so better me than anyone else, I guess. Make sure to do our Lord of the Algorithms work and swipe, tap, refresh, and engage with your boy on the Nightmare Rectangle. In return, we promise to keep you from losing your fucking mind by pointing out all the gibbering insanity that we're constantly surrounded by and reminding you that nothing about it is normal and under no circumstances should it be tolerated. Little surprises around every corner, boys, but nothing dangerous.
Woke up, smoke up, blunt, then I pass out. Pass out. Woke up, what up, smoke up, blunt, then I'm back down. Back down. What? Yup, woke up, smoke up, blunt, then I pass out. Pass out. Woke up, what up, smoke up, blunt, then I